Okay, in this video we're going to talk about satchel charges, or at least the US ones. I was going to print off some pictures of some captured Viet Cong ones to show you as a comparison and stuff, but forgot to do that. I did get a picture of an older one. This is a training aid example of the M183 charge assembly, or satchel charge. Now, first off, what is a satchel charge? A satchel charge is a package of explosive with some type of carrying handle on it and a initiation system for setting it off. That's your just quick, dirty, basic components. What's required: a bag, explosives, and the initiation system or priming system, and the ignition system, which goes part of the priming system or priming assembly. Now, in the US inventory for historical information, and this is a picture of the one from World War II. This is a replica someone had made and had sold on eBay. That is an M37 demolition charge or satchel charge. I'll get you a good close-up here of that, because we'll talk about some differences off the current compared to what it was back then. Now, the World War II one, the primary explosive they used inside it was TNT. That was the primary explosive used by the US military at that time, and most militaries at that time. This was an 8-pound satchel charge. As you can see here in the picture, you have 8 blocks, 4 in the front, 4 in the back. And they would have been set up in 2 packages like this. 4 blocks together on each side. And inside the kit, you also had 2 priming assemblies or primer assemblies, your initiation systems. And I came across one reference that said some of them had a package of time pencils included also. Time pencils were a British thing. The US used them, but it wasn't something that I'm aware of that we made. I know the British made and used quite a bit of them. It basically was a initiation system similar to this, but it was essentially like a pencil. It was a blasting cap with a igniter on it, and you pulled the igniter depending on the type. There were some that were acid. Pulled the igniter and it did the slow burn to the cap, and then the cap went off. And then it would depend on what the burn rate was for that time pencil. Was it 30 minutes? Was it 2 hours? A day? Whatever it was. I am aware that there were some that had a striker assembly in it that went to a percussion cap, like your primer on a cartridge or a shotgun shell. There was a wire that ran through the inside of or alongside a vial of acid. You would crush that vial of acid, breaking the glass. The acid would then start chewing away through the wire, which would release the striker, hitting the percussion cap, setting off the blasting cap. That was another type of time pencil. But that one, obviously, it was good when it was new, but you're not going to keep those in storage long because you really can't trust the acid. That's why that type of thing went out of inventories. So, but this is the World War II issue. This would have been used up through the Korean War. For those of you looking for that for reenactment and information purposes for historical events. It would have been, for the US military, the M37 demolition charge or satchel charge. Now, let's go post-Korean War. So we'll get rearranged here. Make sure you can see the Patreon channel address up at the top. If you like what I do, come on over. Join us over there. If you want my stuff, for the most part, is posted for free. There are some that are patron-only videos over there. And in order to see those, you have to pledge to become a patron of mine. You can do it for as little as $1 a month. So we'll pull this out of here. Now, when we get up into Vietnam, that little 8-pounder, it's not really doing the job. You know, it still can destroy small structures, damage some vehicles and stuff, but we need something with a little more kick. So around Vietnam, we came up with this, the Charge Assembly Demolition M183. This is a 20-pound satchel charge. The explosive content in this was C4. Now, it is made up of M112 blocks, which are 1.25 pounds each. So 20 pounds, we're talking 16 blocks. It was divided into 2 packages of 8 blocks each, and each package was inside a plastic wrap. Along with this pack came 4 priming assemblies, which were 5 pieces of det cord with a blasting cap at each end, and then there was also demo clips with it, so that you could take this charge, put it in a series for destroying fortifications, destroying buildings. That's a lesson learned from World War II, is we needed to be able to tie some of these satchel charges together to breach fortifications, like what was seen on the Atlantic Wall in Normandy when we went through there, or the Siegfried Line when we reached that. So we came up with a way on these newer kits, newer being relative because we're in the Vietnam era, where we could tie these together. Now, one thing that I found missing when I was reading through the inventory that jumped out at me, there was no initiation system, or ignition system, if you want to think of it that way. You still need a time system with an igniter to set this off, which my guess is, I personally never handled these. Just to let you know, I always had to make them when I needed one. So I've only ever seen one of these during my entire time in the military, and that was at a demo range. And we were only issued one as a unit for our entire company, just so that we can ooh and ah at it. And then for that demo range, all of the NCOs, you know, we had our group of troops and we had to make our own. So this was, they gave us one just as a comparison. But so you still had to make yourself an initiation system for this, using your safety fuse, otherwise known as time fuse, M700, non-electric blasting caps, and a fuse igniter, which would have been the M60. Now, how would something like that have been thrown together? Well, you'll take one of your primer assemblies, which has a blasting cap at each end, so a 5-foot piece of det cord. I just kind of prepped this a little bit to jump ahead. You took your det cord, you shoved your blasting cap down in the middle of each pack. And then you went back, found the dead center of your loop here. Now, you'll go together and you'll make your initiation system. So this is my simulated initiation system. Let's say we have our blasting cap down here. Well, we take our ring main or line main here of det cord, put our blasting cap between it, squeeze it together, the det cord on each side of the cap, or at least right next to it. Then we would take our tape for those of you that aren't aware of it, training deck cord is far worse than the real stuff. The real stuff's a hell of a lot easier to work with. This stuff has a tendency to want to spring back, not want to form properly and all that stuff. But you'd put your initiation system in, like so. Then take some of your deck cord, your excess here, what you don't need, leave it inside here. Close your bag, tie it off, and I'm just going to do a crap tie on it right now. You would go through and do knots or whatever, or just your shoelace tie to close it off. And then when you needed this, right before you would use it, you would attach your fuse igniter, which is like this. This is an old rusty one. There's supposed to be a lanyard coming off the safety pin here. Now, something I would do with my initiation systems when I did homemade satchel charges at ranges and stuff, and we'll see if this will attach onto this, but this thing's roached out. It's seen better days. Something I would do is I would take my handle here, make sure this was loose, and then I would tape my igniter to the handle, so that way it's not flopping all over the place. Like so. And then this obviously would be tucked down inside here. The bag would be closed up and all that. There'd be a little bit of loose on here, so as I'm pulling on the carrying handle, it's over my shoulder, whatever, I'm not going to yank it out of the blocks. But this way the igniter's not flopping around and that stuff as I would be running. Now, if you're going to use this, say, to destroy a bunker or that stuff, an enemy bunker, as you're going up, you're getting ready to charge forward to toss the satchel charge into the bunker or whatever, you would pull your safety clip out, press in your pull ring, twist, pull, and you'd pull downward, you don't pull back on the ring. And then she's burning, you run up there to your target, that enemy bunker, and you toss it in. Or place it next to the door, put it in the window, whatever it was. So, and then after the time system would burn down, the blasting cap would go off, setting off the deck cord, setting off the charges. So that's basically how that worked. Now, I did come across references that there is a newer system called the M2 Assault Demolition Kit or Assault Demolition Charge that apparently is the current issue one that replaced these. But I could not find any pictures of it. I couldn't even find references and manuals about it. It was just a note out of Iraq about it being used in the Battle of Fallujah. Now, for actual references that I looked at, for anyone that's wondering, where did you find this information? For the World War II stuff, you can go back to FM 5-25, Explosives and Demolitions. Once you get up into Cold War and that stuff, your best bet is probably FM 5-250 from 1992. That still talked about satchel charges. Now, what gets weird, you get up to the current issue one, which is FM 3-34.214 Explosives and Demolitions, which came out in 2007. It doesn't say a damn thing about satchel charges. It mentions them in how to make training aids, but it doesn't even list it in there under your bulk demolition charges. It's like it disappeared, even though they clearly did use them in Iraq and do use them in Afghanistan. Maybe not as often, but they're still using them. So let's move this down a bit. So we know that. Okay, that's an issue one that I could show you for an example here. Now, oh, I did miss one thing. If you're wondering for size for comparison, okay, you got your C4 block, which is from here to here. Now, World War II, it is the 1 pound TNT blocks, which are about that size. So that'll give you a little size comparison if you're wondering on that. Now, I did come across some references where it actually talked about making them, which is the primary way we did it when I was in. We had to make them ourselves because we hardly ever got the actual satchel charges. Like I said, I only ever seen one during the entire time I was in the military. We always had to make our own. Now, I know some people would say, well, they have a demolitions bag that you're supposed to use for that. Well, the demo bag is this thing, and that thing is designed for use for carrying your explosive blocks and your tools and that type of stuff. Those things are expensive. I'm not going to prep one of those and blow it up as a satchel charge. It's too valuable to me, and it's too well ruggedly made, and it has another purpose. It's meant to carry around my blocks when I'm doing other missions, like if I'm going to go breach or whatever. So I'm not going to make a satchel charge out of that bag. The actual demo bag. Oh, if you can get a hold of these really cheap, go ahead, get a hold of them. They're extremely useful. Especially if you plan or have militia engineers. Now, U.S. military manuals say to use ammo bandoliers for making homemade satchel charges. Well, you can go smaller route, like the saw bandolier. I think the most I fit in one of those was like 5 blocks. Or you can step it up a little bit. You could go the Claymore bag. Just cut the stitching in the center here to open this all the way up, and then you would put your charges in, laying on their side. And you could fit a lot more inside here. So that would be 2 types of bags you could use for making satchel charges. Now, we didn't use that stuff that often. I did use those, say, in training when I was making training aids. But for actual on the range, when we were making satchel charges for training, we used to use these sandbags. Get your blocks together and that stuff, tape them together and that, and then you shove them down inside. You could take this, bend it over, whatever you needed to make it a more compact package, and then, well, we still need a carrying handle. We used to use green engineer tape. I don't have any. The closest I can show you for example of its size and all that stuff would be seatbelt. An old piece of seatbelt type material. Similar in size. We would take the seatbelt, or the engineer tape I should say. We'd make our loop for up on the shoulder, so up above the bag. Take our 2 running ends, run them underneath, cross them over to the sides, and then we would tie them off. You know, one side would get tied off over here, the other end would get tied off over here, and then we would take tape again, this, or when we're doing the handles, this, your green 100-mile-an-hour tape, wrap it all the way around, going side to side to keep the carrying handle in place, and then we would go top bottom. Now when we would need to prime it and that stuff, we would just slit the top or take your crimpers. Remember from the video, you got your pokey end. Poke it through the sandbag into the block. Insert your blasting cap initiation system, and there you would go. But most of the time when we made homemade satchel charges, the only blasting cap we would use would be on the initiation system itself. We wouldn't use it on the actual blocks. We would use the piece of deck cord. We would tie the appropriate demo knot on each end, prime our packages of explosives appropriately, and then tie in our initiation system on that. And then, you know, I would go through, tape the initiation system, the fuse igniter and that stuff to the strap so that I could find it and use it when we got to that point in the training. So now, mention on the Viet Cong in the 60s and 70s. They did have some manufactured satchel charges, such as captured M183s that they stole from US depots. They had Chinese ones, they had Russian ones, and that type of stuff, which for the most part I believe were typically made up of TNT, if I remember correctly. I think that was the bulk explosives comm block sent to the North Vietnamese, and then they gave to the VC. So they had their pre-made packages that were shipped in, and then they would make their own out in the field. Now, they're probably not going to have as many sandbags in the field. They're not going to have as many pouches and bandoliers, and I'm sure they used that stuff when they had it available. But a lot of the pictures I've seen of captured Viet Cong satchel charges, they used to use burlap bags, or bags from seed and that stuff that we gave to the villages. They would use that as their bag, and then they would use rope or vines as the carrying handles. The same way I mentioned about tying it off like a Christmas present using tape, they would do the same thing with vines or the rope. And some of the pictures I've seen, they would have like 2 verticals and 1 horizontal. So you had the 2 holding it together, and then the 1 just holding the handle on and that stuff to it. And then they had their initiation system coming off of that, and then they would use that to toss it into US bunkers. VC sappers, if it was a perimeter bunker, they would probably use a hand grenade or a pole charge to get that into the firing slit. But if they're going after, say, a command bunker, they're going after a sleep bunker where US troops are inside and that type of stuff inside the perimeter, they'd be more likely to use a satchel charge on something like that. So, and I'm sure someone's flipping out right now. So you're telling how to make satchel charges. Now someone's going to be able to go out and do it. Well, you're probably not going to come across the materials, and I did leave out a step or 2. I always do that in these videos. I always leave out 1 or 2 steps. I do that because I have to. That's part of the whole legal thing. Can you find out what those steps are? Yeah. Go out, do your own research, you'll be able to figure it out. So, but this information is primarily meant for reenactors, people doing historic events. They want to explain this stuff a little bit better. You get somewhat of an idea. So you know that, hey, in World War II, we used an 8-pound made out of TNT, the M37, which was used in Korea also. We went up to the Vietnam War. We made the M183 kits, and we used that up into the war on terrorism. But during the Cold War and that stuff, if we didn't get the 183s, we made it out of other materials so that we still got the same effect. And with homemade ones, you can vary how much explosive was in it for whatever purpose. Say I'm using it to take out a perimeter bunker on a defense by Soviet troops who've invaded Germany and we're on the offense now. You know, I probably wouldn't need to use the full 20 pounds of C4. Maybe I'd be able to get away with just using 4 blocks. So 5 pounds of C4 put inside some type of bandolier, like your saw bandolier. And then use that to take out that Russian bunker as we're assaulting toward, you know, to recapture West Germany. Or we go into the war on terrorism, we're going into Iraq and that type of stuff. We're trying to take out Fedayeen positions inside Fallujah or up into Crete or wherever. Well, we're at that time, what would be more appropriate for what was used by U.S. troops if they could not get the M183 or the M2, it would be sandbags. That would have been what was used there as the bag for your satchel charges with whatever weight inside that was appropriate. So there you go. Hopefully it gives you some idea on satchel charges. If you're going to actually look for information in military manuals, I would look at the FM 5-250 and earlier, because the FM 3-34.214 was extremely disappointing, did not say a damn thing on satchel charges. And if you ever look at that manual, something that annoyed the piss out of me, over half of it, it's supposed to be about use of demolitions and explosives, but over half the damn manual is how to give safety briefs. There was how to give they gave you the format for how to give a safety brief for breaching a door, how to give a safety brief for breaching wire. Why the hell does it have to be different format for different things? You know, they had so many different formats for different types of missions. I'm actually surprised I didn't come across a safety briefing to be conducted for teaching a class on safety briefings. That's how stupid the new manual is. So if you're in the military, you're watching this, hey, put in that goddamn complaint. Let the engineer center know they need to fix the goddamn manual. Whoever wrote that had their head shoved so far up their behind, I'm amazed they were able to breathe. An explosives and demolitions manual is supposed to cover explosives and demolitions. It's not supposed to cover, over half of it is supposed to cover frickin' safety briefings and different styles of it. There's other manuals dedicated just to safety briefings. You don't need to fill another manual with the same information. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.